Good afternoon. I'm Sean Bailey, for those who don't know me, current president of the racing club, and that is through all Tony's fault. So he got me there. So I met the Dennis brothers in 1980. I'd come off a very short stint as a jockey, and was broken down at home, and my father was a stock agent, and he was drafting lambs at the Dennis boys' place, and said at the time, I've got a useless son at home who could do with some work. He said, what do you reckon? And they said, well, send him out. So out I went to the Dennis boys, and my first day there I met Mr. Dennis, Mr. Dennis, Mr. Dennis and Mr. Dennis, which got very, very complicated very quickly. So Tony sat me down and said, perhaps you should use our first names. So hence it became Tony, Ray, Joe and Martin. And I was in my impressionable years, I suppose, was an 18-year-old lad, teenager. All I knew was rugby and chasing girls, and the boys weren't so keen on the chasing girls part, but they didn't mind a bit of footy. So I just wandered my way through life with the boys in a sense, and rode a lot of work for them, and we trained a lot of good horses. But Tony's first role was a stockman. I think that all the Dennis brothers in total learnt valuable lessons from their father Harold, and they were farmers, and they were hard-working farmers too. Hard-working as much as the fact was that the stock came first, the horses came second. And so it was the regime for the boys was the fact that we'd do all our horse work in the afternoon or the evening. We tried to sneak the Dennis boys up to Hamilton to receive a racing award, and they were entered into the Hall of Fame for New Zealand racing for contribution to New Zealand racing, and trying to trick 4 crafty farmers from Woodlands into travelling to Hamilton was a deed that I gave up on, and I had to tell them the truth. And Joe was no fan of flying at that stage, so he elected to stay at home, but we got the 3 boys, and Sharon, and I think Robin and Gabby was there as well. My wife Becky was there, and we had a wonderful celebration of life, because they do overachieve but understate themselves, something that I can't do. So I'm always overstated, and they just went through life, and how they went about their business was uncanny. I remember Tony, he was so wily and so shrewd and cunning that he changed the taxation rules in New Zealand breeding at the time. He argued with the accountant constantly, month in, month out, that they were getting taxed wrongly by the New Zealand government. And he was proven right. And for all New Zealand breeders, he changed the face of the landscape of the financial market, and how stakes were paid, and how you were taxed through that. He was a good horseman, and if you meet the 4 brothers, you're meeting 1/4 of the brain, and they were individuals. They didn't think as a collective. They all had their individual strengths. I didn't see a lot of weaknesses. They had a lot of work ethic, and they worked very well individually, singularly or collectively, and that was something that I admired throughout my years. I had 10 years with them, and they taught me everything I knew about a horse, and they weren't afraid to share. And there was a great thing. Too many people have a skill set and they don't like to share it because they don't like anybody to surpass them. But that wasn't Tony Dennis. He gave you everything. I remember he was the only fellow who could ride the swagger. He'd let me ride him occasionally, but I occasionally didn't want to ride him. But he was a horse that decided when he was going home, he would go home. He saw a gate, he'd go through it, and if you're on him, that was fine. If you weren't, that was fine too. That was the swagger. So I got a few nicks on the wall of the stalls out there. I remember Joe and I were riding around the paddock one day, and we saw the chick coming the other way, minus A.G. Dennis. We thought, where the hell's he? So Joe and I carried on riding, and here he was lying down the bottom of the paddock in a gully, and I think the chick might have tried to jump a sheep, and we all knew the fantasy was the best sheep jumper in the tribe. And Tony was lying on the ground, and I think on recollection he had a dislocated shoulder and a dislocated hip. He wasn't saying too much, but he wasn't moaning either. So Joe and I said, "You're right." And he said, "Oh, I'm not too well." We said, "All right, we'll come and get you." So we got to the top of the paddock and I was pulling up and Joe said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going home to get a truck." He said, "These horses need another round." He said, "He'll be there when we get back." So we went round again, give Tony a bit of a wave in the gully and said, "We'll be back." So we went up to the house and I thought we got a truck, but the boys told me we got one of the Ford Falcons, and we got the Falcon out down the paddock, and Ray drove him to hospital, and he convalesced in hospital with the dislocations. The great thing about the boys, they all got one of the progeny of the Pixie. Ray had the Twinkle, Joe had the Fantasy, and Tony got the Dimple, and I don't know who had the Imposter. Did Ali get the Imposter? I can't remember. He was a colt. He was the only one who wasn't a filly, so he was called the Imposter. So they all got a horse each, and the progeny of the the Pixie won 52 races. So that was a great feat, and they all got the right horse. Joe got the Fantasy, and she was a very slight mare, and she didn't take a lot, and that suited Joe fine. The Twinkle was a bit hardier, but the Dimple, she was a character, and she needed Tony's guidance, and she got a little bit more work than others. We used to do a full day's work, and as I say, they weren't watch keepers or timekeepers. They never looked at their watch. They started a task and they finished a task, and it was quite regular. It's regular as such as one night I was walking off the paddock on a horse, and it was 10:45 at night, so we'd done a full day's work. We'd tailed 1,000 lambs and worked 10 horses, and so we were hungry that night, I can tell you. So no, it's been wonderful. So Tony had encouraged me to go into racing administration, and he seconded myself and Todd Dalton, who I see here today, and Toddy and I were jumping stewards on the same day, and what we got was a badge and a cup of tea, but we didn't realise that we had to pull down 50 hurdles as well, so that was a bit of a task. So that's how we started in the Southern Racing Club, and Tony kept on encouraging us and to do everything that we could, and elevated to the committee, and then he gave his role over as president to me, and I've been in the chair ever since, and I'm eternally grateful for him. The landscape in racing has changed quite dramatically, more latterly with the Entane and the likes, and there's some good money around, and they've always been stewards of great horse flesh, so I hope that continues for the family in Tony's honour. So he's a great man. I come up with some crazy ideas occasionally as president, and when I advise the board what Christmas as the races may look like this year, I would always have a nervous sideways glance at Tony and see how his body was shifting in the chair to see if I was on the right track or not. He squirmed quite a bit with me at the helm, so I can tell you that. So I've got some great memories, but there's people who probably know Tony better as well as me. But what sort of a character was he? He was, like Robert said, he was quiet, he was withdrawn, he was kind, considerate, caring. He gave you enough rope to hang yourself. I made mistakes and I learned from them. I remember tying the Vision up to the fence, and I was putting Ajax for a tail because she was a grey horse owned by the sisters Marie and his mother Chrissy and Pam and the likes, and so I had to have this horse spot on for the races, but she put her leg over the rope and she gave herself a fright, and she ran into a concrete post and we had a late scratcher. She would have won by 5 that day, but she went on to win 10 or 12 races anyway, so we didn't come to too much of a sticky end. So he's a superstar man. Love him dearly. Now, those of you who don't know that the Dennis boys have always signed a St Christopher into their racing colours, so for safe travel for the jockey and the horse. And I see that Tony had a St Christopher in his coffin here with him today, and I asked Becky to wear a St Christopher necklace for him today, and so that he has safe travel to his next journey in his life. Thank you very much.